welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca, and in today's episode of Murder Monday, we are talking about the unsolved murder of a 6-year-old girl in Boulder, Colorado. This has been one of the most requested videos that I have gotten, so I figured it was time that I knock it out. This case is crazy because the police botched the investigation so bad that 2 decades later, we are still no closer to having any suspects than we were back in 1996. This is the case of JonBenét Ramsey. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was born August 6th, 1990 to John and Patricia Ramsey. She has an older brother, Burke, who was born in 87. JonBenét is a combination of her dad's first and middle name, JonBenét, and her middle name, Patsy, was her mom's first name. So they clearly loved this little girl from the very beginning. JonBenét won title after title in beauty pageants, and her mom was no stranger to beauty pageants either. She actually won Miss West Virginia in 1977, and her father was an extremely successful businessman. He was the president of Access Graphics, which later would become a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin, and he was named Entrepreneur of the Year in 1996. But 1996 was actually probably one of the worst years of John Ramsey's life because that was also the year that JonBenét was murdered. December 25th, 1996, a little before 10 o'clock in the evening, the Ramsey family returned home from a Christmas party. JonBenét was long since passed out, and Burke was getting pretty tired too. So the Ramsey family sent the children to bed, and before 10:30, John and Ramsey were asleep as well. The 7,000 square foot, 15-room, 104-window, Tudor-style home on the 700 block of 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado was quiet. There was a light dusting of snow on the grass outside, and everyone was pretty excited for Christmas. The following day, after opening presents, the family was going on a vacation to Michigan. Patsy and John woke up around 5 o'clock that morning. They were getting ready for the trip. They were packing, showering. Patsy Ramsey put on her outfit that she had worn to the party the previous night, put on her makeup, and went downstairs to start a pot of coffee. This was the end of the happy morning. At the bottom of the stairs, Patsy Ramsey found 3 pieces of paper lying side by side at the bottom of the stairs. This was a 2.5-page ransom note. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early and arrange for an earlier delivery of the money and hence earlier delivery of your daughter. Any deviation from my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will be denied her remains for proper burial. The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as the police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but we warn you that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions, and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny, as well as the authorities. Do not try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It's up to you now, John. Victory. SBTC. This ransom note was one of the weirdest, if not the weirdest, ransom note that police and FBI investigators have ever seen. They have never seen a ransom note 2.5 pages long. Also, that ransom note was written in the house on Patsy Ramsey's notepad with her pen, and there was a trial run of the ransom note. Investigators would later discover that it would take an individual no less than 20 minutes to write that note if they knew exactly what they were writing when they wrote it. So someone sat in that house for 40 minutes, wrote a practice note, then another note, then put the notepad and the pen back in the drawer and left that note on the stairs for them to find. After reading that her daughter had been kidnapped, Patsy Ramsey screamed and ran up to JonBenét's room to find her not there. Her scream brought John out of the room, and together they went to Burke's room to find him fast asleep. John instructed Patsy to dial 911, and while he read the note, she made this 911 call.
911 emergency.
Police.
What's going on?
515th Street.
What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's blind. 6 years old.
How long ago was this?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Patsy Ramsey, I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been
No,
gone?
I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay,
Please, there's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath for me,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy, 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 Patsy.
Another very interesting piece of information about that ransom note was $18,000 was almost exactly the amount that John Ramsey had gotten in a bonus earlier that year. Police found it very interesting and unlikely that a stranger would know how much John had gotten in that bonus. Also, there were only 2 sets of fingerprints on the ransom note, the investigators and Patsy Ramsey's, and there was no DNA. Although the note instructed them not to call police, that's exactly what they did. They also called family and friends and invited them over. Shortly after the police arrived, so did friends and family, because what else do you do when you find out your daughter is missing and has been kidnapped, but call the neighbors? The friends and family were walking all over the house. They were actually cleaning up. They cleaned up a mess in the kitchen, they cleaned up a mess in the living room, and police were fine with it. They let them do it. Investigators did an initial search of the house looking for any signs of a break-in. In the basement, investigators came to a door that was closed and had a wooden latch on it. He decided not to open that door and went back upstairs. Unfortunately, JonBenét was on the other side of that door. Police thought it was very interesting and a little weird that when they arrived, Patsy Ramsey was mad at them for being in uniform and having a gun. They said that this added some weight to the theory that Patsy Ramsey was involved in the case, but I actually think it's kind of normal. In the letter it said, don't call the police, which is immediately what she did. So if she thinks she's being spied on by the kidnappers and a cop shows up, that could put her daughter in danger. So I get why she would be mad about that. What I don't understand is why police noticed that John and Patsy were very distant. They didn't really talk to each other. They didn't really console each other, which is extremely weird behavior for a husband and wife to have just found out that their daughter was kidnapped. Investigators told John Ramsey and a family friend to search the house, start at the top, work their way to the bottom, and see if they could find anything missing. John Ramsey took a beeline for the basement and went right to the door that the police had failed to open. When he did open it, he found his daughter bound face down in a back wine cellar. She had her hands tied above her head, she had a piece of duct tape over her mouth, and a garrote around her neck. Instead of calling police, which is what he should have done because they told him not to touch anything, he picks up his daughter, carries her upstairs, lays her on the dirty floor, removes the tape from her mouth, calls over his wife, who cries and rubs herself all over JonBenét, touches her hair, touches her face, and then they put a dirty-ass throw blanket over her. In a matter of a couple of minutes, John and Patsy Ramsey have completely contaminated the entire crime scene. They've contaminated the basement, they've contaminated the body, and they made a big show of them touching the body, which now would explain why their DNA was all over the body. And it was. In fact, fibers from Patsy's outfit that she was wearing was found underneath the duct tape, which would explain, if they were involved in the case, why he would take the duct tape off and then Patsy would rub herself all over the body, because now that explains why there are fibers on the duct tape of their dead daughter. After the discovery of the body, detectives overheard John on the phone with his private pilot arranging a flight that same day out of the state. John Ramsey was making plans to fly the entire family to Atlanta. Police said, you're not leaving. You're not allowed to leave the state. But instead of interviewing John and Patsy separately to get an accurate, first outcry report, they let the family go, stay at a friend's house, which later that friend was allowed back into the active crime scene in a police uniform as to not raise suspicion, to collect items for the family and remove them from the house. Oh, and during the initial investigation of the home that on the 26th of December, they only blocked off JonBenét's room. The rest of the house had people walking all over it, contaminating literally every inch of the home. Later, the autopsy would reveal that she had been strangled with the garrote and had some head trauma involved as well. Autopsy report would say that the strangulation and the head trauma happened at the same time. However, investigators would say that the head trauma happened first, and about 45 minutes later, she was strangled. They say this because there was a significant amount of brain swelling before the strangulation happened, and she was still alive when she was strangled. So, investigators believe that she was hit on the head, knocked unconscious, then strangled to death. There was no evidence of sexual assault, but it couldn't be ruled out because there was evidence that her genital area had been wiped down with like a wet wipe. And there was some evidence of vaginal trauma, and her death was ruled a homicide. The garrote was made from a nylon cord, and the wooden dowel in the back used to tighten the garrote was a broken piece of one of Patsy's paintbrush. Also, there was a rope found outside of JonBenét's room, and that rope to this day has never been tested. The police completely screwed this entire investigation. It's insane. The autopsy also revealed that there was pineapple in her stomach that had been consumed a few hours before her death, which is interesting because the parents say that JonBenét had been put to bed and that was the last time that they'd seen her that evening. However, there was a bowl of pineapple in the kitchen that was photographed. So at some point after being put to bed, JonBenét woke up, had some pineapple shortly before being murdered. Police report that Burke, her older brother's fingerprints, were found on that bowl as well. The Ramseys, however, said that Burke slept through the entire event and actually slept several hours after police had arrived at the house, which I find very interesting. He slept through his mom screaming, through police being there, through the discovery of the body. He just slept through all of it. In December of 2003, investigators actually found some blood samples on JonBenét's clothes, which matched some DNA samples that were found in other parts of the home, and it was matched to an unknown male. They ran it through CODIS. It didn't match to anyone. However, fast forward to 2016, it's actually not one, but 2 DNA samples. I've also read some articles that say that there was 6 DNA samples in this one DNA that they found. So they don't have any idea. I honestly think that the DNA came from the body being moved around. She was laid on the floor where people had been walking. There was a blanket over her that was dirty. Like, who knows where that DNA came from? But they have used that DNA to rule out every single suspect, which I think is another huge mistake. So there are a lot of suspects in this case. In fact, they interviewed over 1,600 people and ruled everybody out. But I think there are some very strong contenders for who may be responsible for the murder of JonBenét. First, her family. In the home, when JonBenét was murdered, there was guaranteed 3 people in that home: mom, dad, brother. One of them could very likely be responsible. Patsy Ramsey was known to have a bit of a temper, and JonBenét had a habit of peeing the bed. So there are some that theorize that JonBenét wet the bed, woke up, was very distraught about it. Dad sat her down to calm her down to have some pineapple, while mom got furious and pushed JonBenét, and she hit her head, knocking her unconscious. The family panicked, thinking that they had killed the little girl, and they started to stage a kidnap and murder, which would make sense because investigators said that the scene looked very staged in the basement where they found the body. Other people think that the father did it, since there was some trauma to her genitals. People think that John Ramsey was molesting his daughter. She told on him. He pushed her, she hit her head, and then they staged the kidnapping and the murder. But there's not really a lot of evidence to support this theory. Another theory is that her brother did it. He was downstairs having some pineapple. She came down, stole a piece from the bowl. He got mad and hit her over the head with a flashlight that was found in the kitchen. Now that piece of information is interesting because that flashlight matches the head trauma almost exactly. She also has a two bruises on her back that for the longest time people were saying was from a stun gun. However, those 2 dots match up perfectly with the railroad track of one of Burke's toy trains. So the theory goes she stole a piece of pineapple, he hit her in the head, knocking her unconscious, and he poked her with the train tracks, trying to get her to wake back up. And when she didn't, he went and told the parents. Parents staged it all to protect Burke, which worked really well because Burke was only interviewed twice, once by investigators and once by a child psychologist, and never again until he was a grown man and interviewed by Dr. Phil for the Dr. Phil show. He later would sue ABC for a documentary that they made, which kind of pointed the finger at him as being the person who killed his sister. He sued for defamation of character and actually won that case. Now we get into some of the surrounding people in the Ramsey family. They lived in a really nice neighborhood, but it wasn't the safest. That year, there had been over 100 break-ins. There was something like 38 sex offenders living in the immediate area, so it wasn't the best neighborhood. There was a man, Gary Oliver, who was weirdly obsessed with JonBenét. Oliver was a convicted pedophile, and in 2000, when he was arrested for an unrelated drug charge, they actually found a picture of JonBenét in his backpack. He said that her murder really affected him, much like it affected the rest of the town, and he never really got over her murder, and he wanted to set up a shrine for her so that she would never be forgotten. He was exonerated because his DNA didn't match the DNA found at the scene. Some other things that point to Oliver being a really strong suspect is that several days after the murder, he called a friend of his saying that he had heard a little girl. He said, I heard a little girl in Boulder, Colorado. And the evening that he said he hurt the little girl, there was no other little girls reported as being hurt at that time. Also, he tried to strangle his mother-in-law with very similar knots and a garrote similar to the one used on JonBenét. Also, the dots on her back that some say were Burke's toy train track, others say were a stun gun, were a kind of similar match to a stun gun found on his possession, along with the photo of him when he was arrested in 2000. But like I said, the DNA exonerated him. All of those details are irrelevant because a tiny drop of DNA that they found on her clothes, which first was 1, then was 2, some say 6 DNA profiles, didn't match him, so they let him go. A lot of investigators don't put a lot of weight into tiny DNA samples because there's so many opportunities for it to be contaminated. And this DNA sample had been on the floor, it had been under a blanket, it had been moved around, so it was definitely contaminated. Another potential suspect was a Santa Claus that lived in the neighborhood and had been at the house a couple days earlier for Christmas. He loved JonBenét. He said so. He said that she touched his life and touched his heart, and she had given him a little bottle of glitter, which he took with him into heart surgery and told his wife if he were to die in heart surgery that he would want that glitter mixed in with his ashes. He also gave JonBenét a Christmas card that said that she would be getting a Christmas gift after Christmas. Again, because of the crappy DNA that they found, it didn't match him, so they let him go. Then we have the famous confession of John Mark Carr. In 2006, John Mark Carr, who was living in Bangkok, had confessed to the murder of JonBenét. He was extradited to the United States and they investigated him a little bit, but police said that within 18 hours of his confession, they knew that he wasn't the guy. His DNA didn't match, and on the night of the murder, they had him photographed in Georgia. So a lot of people think, why did he confess? Why did he do that? People say it's for fame, it's for notoriety. I have also read reports that he was in trouble for some child molestation charges in Bangkok, and you don't want to go to prison in Bangkok. So he confessed to the murder to be extradited to the United States, and he kind of got a reprieve and he never went back to Bangkok, so he didn't have to face those charges. Who knows if that's true, but that seems like a pretty reasonable reason to confess to a giant publicized murder to be sent back to the United States. And that's it. That's where the case dies. The DNA doesn't match anybody, even though the verbiage in the bizarre 2.5-page ransom note was very maternal. The handwriting in the note didn't match exactly, but it came very close to matching Patsy's handwriting. Words like possession were spelt wrong, which is a relatively easy word to spell, but attaché was spelled correctly, even with a little accent over the E, which investigators say point to someone purposely trying to make it seem like they don't know how to spell the English language. The fact that Patsy's fingerprints were the only ones other than the investigators found on the note, and that it was written on her notepad from her desk with her pen and then replaced, they just were like, man, that's just a coincidence. Who cares? The fact that her fibers from her clothing that she wore that night were found underneath the duct tape, coincidence. No, they just never really investigated the family all that much. And actually, we find out later that a grand jury indicted the Ramsey family, John and Patsy, as being responsible for the death of their daughter because of abuse, but it never went all the way through because they said they didn't have enough evidence to support that. And then Patsy died of ovarian cancer a little bit ago. John remarried, and Burke is now a successful software developer. No one will ever really find out what happened to JonBenét, I think, because they just botched the investigation so badly that there's no way for them to get any really solid details or solid leads. So I think it'll just be an unsolved case that kind of lives in infamy in the public's mind. Who do you think did it? I think it was a mom. I think the mom got mad, pushed her, she hit her head, and then they spent the rest of the evening covering it up. There's also a really stupid theory that an animal did it, because they found some feather fibers and some animal hair fibers underneath the duct tape as well. But those people who think that it was an animal haven't been able to explain how the owl got a garrote around the little girl's neck. We're still waiting on that explanation. All right, guys, that was the case of JonBenét Ramsey. It was actually kind of hard to find information on this case, I think because it's been so popular for so long and there's so many theories that it's hard to find exact details on it. That's why I encourage you to watch as many documentaries as you can, read as many articles and as many stories as you can so that you can form your own opinion on this. Let me know in the comments who you think did it. A lot of people think that it was either Patsy or Burke that did it. Those are the two most popular theories about this case. I'd like to know what you think. Also, if you don't have an opinion, just let me know that you stopped by. I like it when you guys just say hi to me. I will link in the description box below my Linktree link. It still has all of my links in it. It has my TikTok, it has my Instagram, it has my merch in there. All of it is in there to make it all still organized. I think I really like the Linktree idea. Oh, and the survey is in there. So if you think of a case that you would like me to cover, you can put all of the information there and they send me an email to let me know that you are interested. All right, guys, I will see you in the next Murder Monday. Stay weird. I love you so much and I hope you have the best day ever. Okay, bye.